Nice to have Dr. Jack back. I think we spoke about a year ago. Um, it's been an interesting challenge and discovery for me down the world of decentralized medicine and quantum biology. And with the recent data that's coming out lately that shows that the research shows that it's the sleep world and the sleep apnea world is kind of coming up to speed with Uncle Jack's thesis that shows that sleep and sleep apnea are rooted in mitochondrial health. So my question for you is, what metric can clinicians or individuals use to measure mitochondrial health?
We don't have really good ones right now, and that's also by design. You have to realize the paradigm in power is still pointing their targets at RNA and DNA, not mitochondrial DNA. That's been like the big criticism of Doug Wallace for the longest time. We only spend about 1% of the NIH budget on mitochondrial focus, but that's because it benefits big pharma. So doctors need to understand that. So what you need to do is be crafty.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know, about 10, yeah, I think it was now 11 years ago. I was at a Bulletproof conference when Dave Asprey tried to throw me out of it. And I told a radiologist there that when I got home, I would write two blogs about redox and how you could kind of do it, based on that time frame, which was 2014. Sadly, nothing has really improved since that time. So
Right.
those two blogs remain pretty accurate. One was the biochemical side and the other one was the MRI side. The thing that I've always defaulted to for me is I use MRI and a special deuterium software package that I use to see deuterium shadows in different people's body. What am I looking there? I'm looking for proton precession problems with shadows, and that gives me a clue that uncoupling protein number 2 is open and there's too much deuterium inside the gate, and that tells me that the TCA and urea cycle don't work. Why? Why is that important for this whole study with sleep? You have to know, like, all the stuff that I've written, especially recently. It's no longer a mystery. Like, if you read the demyelination series and the consciousness series, that myelin actually is a function of sleep. In fact, we innovated myelin coming out of the Great Oxygenation Event for multiple reasons. But what does one of the big things with myelin tied to sleep? Myelinating our neurons actually allowed us to sleep less. And that's a key issue. So fundamentally, we should be able to see on MRI defects in myelination. So what I tell everybody who's a sleep doctor is you start getting total white matter volume and gray matter volume stuff done on your patients. If they've had old studies, you should go back and look to see if that volume has changed. That's kind of things that we see in people with MS and people with demyelinating disorders. And everybody knows that people with Parkinson's, ALS, they also have problems with myelination too. They also have problems with sleep, but no one's ever been able to, link all these things together. And why is this a big deal? Most people who have sleep apnea have the key problem. They never see AM sunlight. And that's how you control TCA and urea cycle to make myelin. It's also how you optimize microtubule function. That's the cognition side of this. But most people are in the sleep world where you're at.
Mhm.
They know that cognition and sleep problems also go together, but they don't understand how it happens. And sleep is a very interesting study because uh, oxygen isn't what people think. Like, I always try to tell people who are in the sleep space, if you really want to get a master class, you really need to read Nick Lane's book, Oxygen.
Mhm.
And that kind of tells you it's a good foray into learning about the Great Oxygenation Event. But the Great Oxygenation Event, to this day, as far as I'm concerned, still the greatest epic on the planet to understand how people are falling apart today, because oxygen builds complexity, but oxygen also had to be controlled. And when you have mitochondrial damage, oxygen becomes a toxin. When your mitochondria intact, oxygen is not a toxin. And the modern correlate for that is, COVID. when we had people who had COVID who couldn't breathe and we put endotracheal tubes down them, what did we do? We gave them ARDS and we killed them.
Mhm.
And it's the same story with sleep apnea, but people don't see that microcosm in this analogy that I'm giving you. And all of this is borne out by what happened in the GOE, because the GOE had variable levels of oxygen as we went through. And that's how we got all the control arms in mitochondria. That's where CCO comes from. That's where cardiolipin comes from. All of these things are disordered in people with sleep apnea, every last one of them. Not everybody is the same. Certain sleep disorders have different levels of mitochondrial damage. The other way that people are doing mitochondrial studies, I have a good friend in the Philippines. He also has a clinic in France and Washington D.C. Dr. Ted Chozo. He does metalomabobic studies where he's looking at like what's the effectiveness of the TCA, what's the effective of urea cycle, how do you handle carbohydrates? People who follow me understand that when you eat a ketogenic diet, you make the most water. Here's where guys like Siegfried, who's in the cancer space as a PhD researcher, make a mistake. What happens when you eat a ketogenic diet? You have shitty mitochondria. You actually make the cancer worse. See, that's the nuance that he misses. And guess what? Why is that important for the apnea space? The same thing is true there. A ketogenic diet makes sleep apnea worse. And this is something that's lost on people. Why? Because when you're putting a shit ton of fat in, what are you doing effectively? You're giving people an overload of electrons and protons. Well, they got to do something with it when they have a defective engine.
Right.
What are they doing? They're putting more weight on.
Right.
One of the classic guys that I tried to highlight this in literally a long time ago, but it didn't go well in that community. And some of the subsequent things that happened really highlighted. A guy named Jimmy Moore used to be in the low carb space.
Mm-hmm.
He would tell everybody, look, you got to eat a ketogenic diet. But Jimmy Moore never changed his electromagnetic footprint. And what happened when he lost all his weight? He gained it all back and then some. And then he became a child molester and a child abuser and got thrown in jail.
Mm-hmm.
He used to be great friends with some of the people that are in the keto space still to this day.
Right.
And the reason why his story should resonate is you need to understand it's not the food that's the issue. It's the state of the engine. And the state of the engine when it comes to apnea is also a big deal. So when you have people that have mild, moderate, or severe, or
Right.
we want to go obstructive versus central,
Central.
what you're dealing with is differences in where the mitochondrial damage is. For example, central sleep apnea, it's the reticular activating system. It's in the brainstem. It's between, the anterior part, which is controlled by the anterior spinal arteries and some of the arteries from the cerebellum. But those are like the bottom branchial clefts that are associated with cranial nerve 9 and 10. The posterior part of the brainstem usually is posterior spinal artery and also some of the cerebellar vessels. When you understand that blue light and melanopsin play a role here, when you do an MRI on somebody, what are you really looking for? You want to see where the deuterium shadow is. Is it posterior? Is it in the middle? Or is it anterior? Or is it a combination thereof? And it kind of gives you a clue what's going on. Not only that, then you add in the white matter volume. You add in the gray matter volume. Then you add in the patient's history. Are they an IT specialist that works in a basement all day that never sees the sun? Well, if that's the case and they don't see a sunrise, they can never remyelinate. Why would you ever think they're going to get better? And then you, as the sleep specialist, on the medicine side, okay, we're going to give them a machine. We're going to give them more oxygen. That's exactly what you do when you intubate somebody. Or you're a dentist. Okay, they got a class 2 malocclusion or a class 3. Let's do palatal expansion, or let's do a double jaw Lafort.
Right.
Basically, like putting an endotracheal tube in somebody.
Right. I mean, I told a friend of mine, I mean, basically, in some patients, double jaw could be permanent CPAP. I mean, that's kind of what that's what you're doing.
Right. And those people, if you actually look at them long term, they don't have good outcomes from the surgeries. And if you want to know the truth, the oral surgeons knew about this probably more than anybody else. And I know about it because I used to be an oral surgeon. It got taken out of our armamentarium as oral surgeons. One of the main reasons that I switched from oral surgery to neurosurgery, I knew that my favorite operation was getting taken to the woodshed by insurance. Why? Because we didn't have good data to show people that they got better. Now, people who had the cosmetic
Hmm.
surgery, they
Right.
didn't want to look like a class 3 or a
Right.
class 2. That's a different issue because plastic surgery, you're going to pay for it anyway. But
Right.
most of the people that were getting their surgery approved, sleep apnea was the number one way to do it.
Right.
And that was getting taken to the woodshed because the insurance companies rightly pointed out these people aren't getting better after we spend, 50 grand fixing their face.
So I guess the question is like in my world, you take a kid who, small jaw, tongue-tied, just really deficient upper maxilla. Some of these kids are going to need to be expanded at some point. I mean,
Well, it depends why. I
yeah,
mean, this is a question you
yeah,
got to ask.
yeah,
Like what you just said, your premise is not good.
good.
You're assuming that they have to. But remember what we're talking about. What's the correlate in the attic? The correlate in the attic is craniosynostosis and all the syndromes tied to this. And then brain health. What do we know about people with defective mid faces? We know that the anterior and middle skull base aren't growing. That actually tells you that there's more hypoxia in utero going on at those levels. Here's the funny thing. We can talk about the A16C guy. Take a look at Mark Andreessen's head. Guy clearly has an untreated craniosynostosis. Has it affected him?
No,
Well, there you go. So
it
you know,
hasn't appeared to. It hasn't appeared
well,
to.
you're
Yeah,
being a cosmetic dentist when you say
right,
that. Why? Because it's offensive to your training to see a class 2 or a class 3.
right.
And to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you, I think the number one problem with class 2s, as far as I'm concerned, is orthodontists making the gummy smiles. Like when you see people with a gummy smile, by definition, these people had a transgenerational in utero problem. These are the people that are going to have problems down the road. But I'm going to tell you, they're going to get, different chronic diseases from this hypoxia measure. The real answer for young parents, as I see it,
Hmm.
when the dentist makes this diagnosis, take your kids out of school.
Hmm.
Where your kids are getting radiated by Wi-Fi, making you more hypoxic, making less deuterium depleted water and cytochrome C oxidase. Put them in the sun because guess what? They can play catch up. Why do you have to run straight to the orthodontist, to do this? You know why? Because that's what our profession has trained parents to do. That's what they've trained general dentists to do with the orthodontist. When you see a class 2, a class 3, refer them as fast as possible. No, that's not the answer. And if you want to know the correlate in my world, because I just did a consult with a lady in Canada about this in the scoliosis world with orthopedic and neurosurgeons who focus in on this. These kids get scolies. What's the first thing you do? Oh, well, let's get them while their curve is still not locked in and let's try to operate on them. Let's do all these fancy untethering procedures. And then we'll do that before. And if we can't do that, then we have to put screws and rods in them. And we just created another $50,000 operation. So, like, actually, when you see this muscle skeletal issue, and the other thing that I would tell parents to do, how do you put the brakes on the dentists and the orthopedic surgeons that want to do scoliosis surgery or big facial surgeries? Go immediately and get your kids vitamin D level and find out what it is, because that's going to be a proxy for the level of hypoxia. People don't think about this, but when your vitamin D level is really low, it by definition tells you at the mitochondrial level you're hypoxic. And remember kind of what I've taught you when you read the blogs and you're on part of my forum reading things that I haven't even posted yet for the public. Vitamin D, the VDR receptors on the inner mitochondrial membrane, it slows electron chain transport down. That should wake you up. Why the ketosis issue is a big issue. So if you don't have vitamin D as the braking mechanism, do you understand that by definition, you got a redox problem? So why wouldn't you put these kids in a better environment to see what the effect of maxillary growth could be in the future? Because my belief is no one's talking about this. And I think that we can fix a lot of these kids that have hypoplasia in the maxilla or hypoplasia in the mandible. Because what is that really telling us? Maxilla is V2 distribution. The mandible is V3 distribution. Well, you can correlate that and see if you can get the speed up. And when you understand that the trigeminal nerve is also tied to a branchial arch, you'll start to see, well, that's why these kids have problems with ear infections. That's why these kids have problems with their eustachian tubes. Like the oral surgeons, the dentists, and the ENTs don't really talk to each other about this, but the embryology is all there. So if you're able to turn this on, kind of like I'm trying to tell people about autism, why can't you fix facial deformities and spine deformities the same way if you understand that the kids are defective at the mitochondrial level right off the bat? And more often than not, the reason for this is it's transgenerational problem from the parents that's actually been hardwired because we're putting kids in school. Now they're in preschool. Now they're being radiated from the time they're 2 years old. And parents really fuck this up because they give their kids iPads and iPhones. I mean, hello. I mean, you're basically creating a gold mine for oral surgeons and for orthodontists. And I mean, if you want to do that, I'm okay with it, but I have to be honest with you. I think I don't think dentists have real and oral surgeons have been malice here, but I'll tell you who I do think has some malice because I think they know. I think the orthodontists are the bad dudes here. And they've been feeding at this trough for so long. They don't want that trough to go away. And I personally think the best way, like if I had the power in dentistry, I would mandate that all general dentists really become mitochondriacs to try to treat these kids from the get-go who have risks of class 2 and class 3. Put them back in an environment and see if you can't speed up maxillary growth and speed up mandibular growth. Because my belief really ties all the way back to Peter Unger when he pulled all those skulls out and said, look, people that lived in nature had perfect dentitions and perfect skeletal alignment. Well, if you already know that that's your randomized controlled clinical trial, why aren't we recapitulating that in the modern world? Because we're not. That's
No.
not what the advice says.
Where I've landed at trying to train getting these kids to try to train, myofunctional therapy, train their tongue, work on circadian principles, trying to get them outside. And that's kind of where I've landed. It's hard. It's a hard uphill battle when parents they want to go, they want to go get expanded. So you kind of have to like try to slow them down. But I mean,
I
if
understand
I
what you're
can,
saying. The consult that I just did with the lady from Canada, that was her question to me. Look, I want to do it untethering because the insurance will pay for it now. They
Mhm.
won't pay for it in the future. And I said, do you realize that you're basically trading a time for money decision here for your kid? And I said, your kid has no say in this. I said, you need to sit down with your kid and let them listen to what I told you in the consult. And to her credit, she did it. But I'd say the same thing to parents. Like when you do a consult with them, you need to actually not only just tell the parents this stuff, Doug, is the dentist. You need to tell the kids, say, look, you're not in a position of power here. You're like a prisoner in jail.
Mhm.
But this is actually people doing something to you. Like if you want to really scale this and be controversial, this is almost like the decision that people make with circumcision.
Mhm.
Kids have no informed consent in this. It's really tied to the parent. And if you really think about it, like if you really want to get circumcised for whatever reason, whether it's religious or not, don't you think it would be smarter for somebody to make that decision, say when they can go to war, when they
Mhm.
can be drafted? Like even then, I think that's crazy because we won't let kids rent hotel rooms and rent a car until they're 25 when they're fully myelinated, which comes back to this story that we started with. We have rules in place for kids are better able to make decisions when they're fully myelinated. But don't you find it ironic that we can draft people at 18 and we can put them in student loan debt at that time because they really don't understand? Well, aren't we doing the same thing with sleep apnea? Aren't we doing the same thing with scoliosis? Aren't we doing the same thing with dentition? And aren't we doing the same thing with circumcision? My point to people is we are. And I think when we have children that are born with malocclusions, parents need to know that you likely were the cause from the transgenerational epigenetic thing. And I understand from what we're seeing with COVID now that people don't want to talk about the root cause problem. But if you can fix these kids without fancy, expensive procedures, why in the hell wouldn't you try that first? To
Right.
me, it makes no sense for you to put your kid under the scalpel for something that may be able to fix. I think early diagnosis by the general dentist, because remember, you're the guys that see these kids before the oral surgeons and before the orthodontists. You actually are the best gatekeepers to really make these recommendations. And to be honest with you, I don't think you need, I think all you need to do is go to your dental meetings and teach people stuff like this. I actually tell you, get an hour and replay this video in front of all those dentists.
Right.
That's exactly what I would do. Why? Because I remember all the things that I was taught in dental school, and most of it was hogwash, especially around oral biology, and how dentin really works in a tooth and how enamel really works. There are so many other things that are available to people. I mean, we now know that we can use laser therapy to regenerate teeth. Why aren't we doing that? Why isn't that standard of care? Well, you know why? Because the ADA never went that route. They made sure that people like Weston A. Price stayed in the shadows.
Shadows, right?
And that's the thing that dentists have to do. And I know this is disruptive to the practice of dentistry, but if you truly went into this altruistic and you want to be the best doctor you can be, I think you have a duty to tell patients the truth. And I think what we just went through collectively through COVID for 5 years, I think that resonates even louder now because everybody knows that we've been bullshitted. And nobody wants to go back and think that, hey, the way we practice dentistry or orthopedic surgery or neurosurgery when it comes to musculoskeletal injuries or transgenerational injuries is actually the same as COVID, but it is. And, that's the hard reality. And the only way you come to this realization is when you really become a student of evolutionary biology and understand truly what happened with oxygen and UV light in the Great Oxygenation Event, because it determines why we're seeing these kids today, why scoliosis is more common, why double jaw surgery is more needed, because kids' jaws are being impeded by the things that are in their environment. And when parents understand putting your kid in a non-native EMF Chernobyl for 8 to 10 hours a day is not something that improves their dentition, it makes it worse. Then maybe you say, okay, we got to live smaller. One of the parents got to stay home and homeschool the kids so that they can be in the environment you're in behind you or I'm in here.
Right.
And do I understand that is
Challenging.
yeah, it's against the modern dictum. But remember where the modern dictum comes. The people that are in power that did all the stuff about COVID, they're the ones that broke the nuclear family up so one parent couldn't stay home and do everything. Why? Because they wanted to tax two parents. That's how far back this goes. And I think when you understand this and go, it's time for me to push back on a lot of things, because if we don't push back, what's going to be the next COVID? Like, are we going to keep subjecting our kids to procedures and surgeries they don't need? I mean, Bobby Kennedy and McCary are doing that right now with kids with jabs. I mean, 25,000 kids are getting loaded with this stuff. But what am I telling you when it comes to dentistry and orthopedic spine surgery for scoliosis? It's the same story. The only thing is it rhymes. It's not caused by a jab.
Right.
It's actually caused by light through the germline of the mom and dad who have been forced to work for the last 125 years because the Industrial Revolution, because the robber barons, had a plan.
Right.
And the plan was really to weaken the Constitution and make people their slaves. And they've done a great job of creating economic slavery.
Right.
But, I don't expect dentists to sit in their office and have this philosophical walk with me, but they need to, even if they don't want to have it with me or you, they need to have it with themselves in the mirror and say, okay, what do I want to do? I mean, to your credit, when you came to me, most of the stuff that I was telling you, you were incredulous about. You were like, I don't know if I believe any of this, Jack. And I'm like, good. It's the mark of an educated mind. It takes something you don't believe, examine it. And then when you see how I've laid this case out over the last year and how it makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, you start to go, okay, when you realize that I might be right, once you have that realization and you continue to do bad things to people, then you're a bad guy.
Hmm.
That's what
Right.
I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, I agree
And
with that.
everybody can fix the problem. Like I can tell you, I stopped doing big, huge scoliosis surgery when I had this come to Jesus moment 20 years ago. Started telling parents just what I told you here. Now, you want to know the truth? That took millions of dollars out of my practice.
Right.
By 2010, I stopped doing scoliosis surgery completely because I thought it was completely unnecessary. But nobody saw it that way. Why? Because it was one of the biggest growth injuries in spine growth industries in spine surgery. After I left dentistry, I found out that sleep apnea surgeries became the same thing in dentistry. And then when I saw dentists getting involved in it that were not oral surgeons,
Mhm.
that's when I knew, okay, this is the same issue that was present in scoliosis surgery, in neurosurgery, and orthopedics. And, I knew when I talked to those people about this issue then, ironically, the meeting where I tore my knee meniscus, that was one of the topics of the day. That should
Yeah.
tell you just how long ago that was.
Right. So my buddy Andy Cohen, he was actually the impetus for my last chat with you because I had an inkling that there was some connection that especially in adults, you do maxillary expansion or you do double jaw surgery in adults. I mean, the risk of relapse is really really high in sleep apnea patients because you have to get the metabolics, you have to get the mitochondria
Correct.
dysfunction going. You have to solve the water problem, which most people
They don't
they don't
understand.
understand the
Water,
water
the
problem.
water problem makes oxygen less toxic.
Exactly,
And
right.
that's really it. You got to become, once you realize oxygen is the key,
Yeah.
then you got to become a water muse. You got to
Ex-
become an expert
Right.
on cytochrome C oxidase, and then you start going, okay,
Yeah.
now this is the reason why mitochondria and sleep apnea are really linked.
I really think. And so the pushback we get in my little sphere is there's a paper in the ENT literature of the U triple P, where they cut out the soft palate. So it's a horrible surgery. It's rarely done anymore. I mean, it really didn't work. But the one thing that the orthodontist will hang their hat on is that, those people who had the U triple P, even though it relapsed, um, their longevity was longer. In other words, they lived longer. So
They also
therefore,
had higher amounts of cancer, right?
no, I don't. Yeah, no.
Yeah, well,
It makes
remember,
sense. It makes sense. Yeah.
it's a marketing exam. Remember what I told you before that,
Right.
in my opinion,
Right.
over my 35 years knowing and being a dentist,
Right.
orthodontists are the most unethical part of dentistry. That I know that's very unpopular to say to a group of dentists,
Yeah.
but I fundamentally believe that. Why? Because I worked with a lot of orthodontists when I was an oral surgeon, and they are the plastic surgeons of dentistry.
Mhm.
And all they care about is aesthetics. They don't care about anything else. And they'll tell you it's about function, but it's really not. They care about what your teeth look like. They don't care if the gums look like that. As long as
Right.
the teeth below it look pretty,
Right.
that's all they care about.
Right.
And when you begin to realize that, they're cherry picking things in the data.
Hmm.
The fact that the ENT guys who are incentivized to do this surgery
Right.
are no longer doing this surgery should tell you
Right.
just how nefarious them hanging their hat on this really is. But see, that's first principle thinking.
Right.
And you have to remember, when you introduce money into medical and dental decision making,
Hmm.
truth often flies out the window. Why? Because marketing is legalized lying.
Right.
And I understand the business of dentistry. I also understand that dentists, compared to doctors, most of them still are businessmen. You guys haven't been, screwed by being employees.
Right.
You're still independent. But I'm going to tell you, that's where the advantage comes, because I think because you're independent, you get to do
Right.
and have less constraints on you. So, like when you hear new science, you go, okay, now I'm beginning to understand this.
Right.
Um,
I
I'm going to
can
tell,
I can
I,
incorporate it. I
right.
can
Not
incorporate
only incorporate it, but you know what I think you should do?
it.
Here's an advice that I'm giving to general dentists. Take the power of the orthodontist away and start moving pallets and putting them in the sun. Use devices to speed the process up by getting the kid in the sun. Guess what then? You actually are taking their power away.
Right.
And when you start to see that you can really help these kids by augmenting mid-face movement, as long as you're doing things right, meaning you're getting their mitochondria correct while you're doing this, you can eliminate the orthodontist. And guess what? You'll notice, because your referral numbers will go down. Guess what? They have no way of getting to that patient group. Their real rate limiting effect is they never get to that patient first. You guys do.
Right.
It's the biggest mistake that primary care doctors have made in medicine for the same reason. Most of them are dumbasses. They don't realize how much power they have in the hospital, and the hospital uses them as the biggest economic slaves in the system. That's the reason why most internal medicine doctors go get more training and become ICU doctors. Once the administration controls them, that's how you get high profit margin things down the pike. And people don't understand this. They haven't done the deep dive in how this process of centralization really is slowly morphed over time. And what it does, it usurps freedom, power, and time from patients. And the sad part is when you realize it, you as the dentist or us as the doctor, or like me doing both,
Right.
You realize that you're complicit in this. And once you realize you're complicit, then I think that's when you become a criminal. But when you're ignorant of it, which most people are, the job of a guy like me is just to teach you, hey, this is out there. And you've heard what I said, as a member of my site. I tell everybody, look, I'm okay if you lie to everybody else, but you're not allowed to lie to yourself.
Right.
You look in the mirror, and when you know you're starting to lie to yourself and you're still doing bad, nefarious things, that's the reason, like right now, I have a huge problem with Bobby Kennedy. Because he knows the truth. He wrote a damn book that tells the truth, and he's still popping 25,000 kids a day. I don't care that the politics and everything else is difficult. When you know the truth and you don't act, you are a problem. You are not the solution. And I say the same thing when it comes to apnea. I say the same thing when it comes to, ozone therapy and, HBOT. There's certain times that HBOT can help, but those times are few and far between. And I did a podcast, I don't know, 6 months ago with a doctor from Australia who told me, well, every diabetic I treat, I put in HBOT. And I said, you're an idiot. And of course, I'm the bad guy and the bully. But when you actually lay the story out for them, he's harming people. I have a duty to tell people the truth.
Right.
Once you understand that harm exists, I don't think that guy really understood. So I don't think he's a criminal. I just think he's ignorant.
Why do you think ozone is become such the big buzzword? I mean, I guess my concern with this whole mitochondria and sleep issue, yeah, it's money. But I feel like the functional medicine people are going to come out with all these mitochondrial tests to actually,
Well,
and then
can we flip the script here?
Yeah, go
Since
ahead.
it's founded on the orthodontist,
Yeah.
functional medicine doctors are the biggest criminals in medicine. They're bigger than the allopathic doctors.
Yeah.
Why? Because they bankrupt people using all these useless tests. And guess what? If you sit them down and say, okay, let's have a discussion about the GOE and how myelin and microtubules fit, they're going to be like, bidee, bidee, bidee. That's all, folks. In other words, they have no earthly idea, Doug, how this works. So think about it. Why would you ever give somebody the power to order hundreds of thousands of dollars of tests on you? In fact, I did a consult right before you this morning.
Yep.
Where a lady spent tons of money, never got any answers. She's got a pretty significant problem. And when I told her what the issue was, she was stunned. Yesterday, I had an in-person consult, first one.
Yeah.
His main problem, literally we solved in 5 minutes. But what was the problem? Again, a testing problem. That the doctor ordered the test and had no earthly idea what the test meant. And then he got pushed in the centralized care path, to get on interferon and this and that. When if he had had a doctor that really understood what was going on, literally you could change the mix. And here's the irony that happened in this consult. Why I'm telling you this. I had Jeremy Franco here, who works for me here in El Salvador. His sister's a doctor in Guatemala. We called his sister up during the consult while he was sitting here. I said, is this available, in Guatemala or El Salvador to get this test done? Because it's something that I don't normally do. And she goes, yeah. And she goes, not only that, we have the cure for this problem to make it go completely away. And I looked at him and I said, Do you understand now why functional medicine failed you? And he goes, why didn't they tell me this? I said, because they want to keep testing you. They want to keep selling you supplements. They want to keep telling you, like Thomas Siegfried does, oh, if you have cancer or you have a pre-malignant condition, just eat a ketogenic diet. But they never tell you that AM sunlight is the key to the ketogenic diet,
Right.
because you can't use the TCA cycle if you're eating fat.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that I think is really important. And I like teaching this stuff because I think it's so rudimentary and so basic. It's kind of like how I used to think about restorative dentistry when I was in dental school. You know, you have a cavity and then you fill it with an amalgam. You have to have the dexterity to go and do a class 1, class 2, class 3. But here's, you know what the most important part of restorative dentistry is? When do I need to open up the fissure with my high-speed bird? Is a pit and fissure enough? You know that dentists that are in California, they open pits and fissures all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where I trained in the Northeast, we didn't do that. And there's an interesting conundrum to that. Why? Because we're all taught that dental decay is a function of carbohydrates.
Right.
That's a half truth.
Mm-hmm.
The real truth is if you don't get in the sun,
right.
your teeth are going to fall apart.
Right.
And the thing is, when's the last time any dentist ever told a parent the real reason your kid's teeth are falling apart? Yeah, putting the bottle in their mouth is a bad thing, but why is your kid's vitamin D level 9?
Right.
And you know what you'll be amazed to find if you're a dentist? Go and look at all these new dentitions that don't have anything but sealants in it, and then check their vitamin D level. You might be shocked to find out the people that have the best teeth have also the highest levels of vitamin D.
Right.
What does that tell you? Remember, your teeth are basically neuroectodermal derived things. Vitamin D controls the neuroectoderm.
Right.
So does vitamin A. Vitamin A is the blue light part of the story, and vitamin D is the UV violet part. How about you get people out? Dent really responds to near infrared and red. That's the reason why those red lasers show that dentin can be regenerated. Well, if you got into a pulp chamber, don't you think it would be nice to have a special red light razor light there instead of using Ketax cement or whatever the hell you guys use now?
Right.
Or send it to the endodontist to pull the nerve out? I mean, what does Becker say about pulling the nerve out? You got no DC electric current in the tooth. Is that you got any chance for regeneration? What does that do
No.
to trigeminal signaling, in the mandibular division? We don't know, but I guarantee it's UPEs.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like once you got the framework down, you begin to go, oh, damn.
I think that, I think the challenge for just personally for me is, I'm a dentist. And so people come in from their physicians with, they'll come in with their functional medicine doc. They'll come in with their, the laundry list of, health problems. And I can look at them now and I'm like, you need to go in the sun. And if I can get them to go see the morning sun, I feel like that's a win. That's about the only win.
The single most important thing that dentists need to do, if you want to know the truth, just get them
in sunrise.
Sphinx. Sunrise is the most important. Then the higher the dental problem is, then they may have to do also a PM sun before the sun sets.
Right.
But dentists need to get there. Just remember something. I was a dentist before I was a doctor, so I'm not going to give you the dentist out card. Right. No, you need to push back.
No, I do, and I try to get every patient to go see the sunrise. It's just it's a heavier lift, when they walk in with.
I know it is.
You're fighting. You're swimming upstream, basically.
Right. Well, you're fighting the doctors. You're fighting the fact that doctors think they're smarter than dentists.
Right.
I'm probably the unicorn. Why? Because I was a dentist and an MD, and I know that doctors are morons. So they've had more uploaded in their head that's bad for patients than even dentists have. Now, dentists have their share.
Yep.
With fluoride and all that stuff, but dentists also have a modicum of sovereignty still left because you guys don't work for the man.
They don't, right?
Most MDs do. And I think that's an advantage to dentists. Why? Because you can push back and your referral base really isn't coming from doctors. It's coming from other dentists.
Right.
So you actually have an ability to do stuff. The thing that you're probably who you're going to piss off more than anything else is the orthodontist, but who cares? They never refer patients to you anyway.
Rarely. Right. Yeah.
You're the one referring, it's thermodynamically a one-way street.
Right.
if you're taking patients away from them and your patients think you're great because you avoided $5,000 worth of an orthodontic bill, why isn't that a win, Doug?
Right.
Why
Oh,
are
for
you
sure.
guys doing more
Yeah.
craniofacial manipulation with, you know, what I would consider real orthodontics? Like they've given up the real
Yeah.
orthodontics. You guys should take it back.
So, I mean, I'm in my own practice, we're heavily focused on myofunctional therapy. I mean, every single person needs to, no one's tongue is functioning the way it should work. No one's tongue sticking on the roof of the mouth. Yeah, they can go on YouTube and and I tell them to go on YouTube and do the exercises. If you don't want to, you can work with my you can pay my myofunctional therapist if you want to have her walk you through it. But anyone who wants to come in for a tether gets myofunctional therapy, at least a screen, and at least we got to make sure their tongue's functioning first. I mean, give them the option to not have surgery. That's the way I look at it, because I think that's the
That's what
best way to go.
I think. I agree with you. And I think what you're effectively doing there by putting them through that workout, the way you need to sell it to them is say, look, you may go to the gym to work out your big muscles. What you're doing here is you're working out all the muscles in the branchial arches that are innervated by cranial nerve 5, 7, 9, 10, and 12.
Right.
And you understand that those are all the same branchial arches that help develop the jaws. I mean, that's it. And what I'm trying to tell people is your brain case is mush when it comes out. Turns out so is your midface.
Right.
So guess what? The more you can teach families that this is a workout, to get that palatoglossus muscle working to stimulate the vagus nerve so that you get and reverse the hypoxia and you can stimulate CCO, and people begin to realize that some of the stuff like Erwin LaCour teaches people about breathing,
Mhm.
breathing exercises should be something everybody does with apnea when they're kids.
Right.
Like you got a malocclusion, you should be doing apnea level exercises for your kids.
Right.
Instead of taking your kids, I don't know, to soccer practice, to get a stupid trophy. How about you do something that's worthwhile so you can save them from either a lifelong apnea or cardiac risk or, $10,000 worth of dental work. I mean,
Right.
to me, that's the PR move that I think you guys need to start going down. And yeah, I do think it's going to be a sledding through. But this is what I would say to all the dentists who listen to this: the science is on your side. Like
Mhm.
evolutionary biology, the GOE. And I went to dental school too. I know you guys didn't learn that, but
Right.
just remember something. Neither did I. And if I
Right.
learned it, what the hell can't you?
Right.
I think I'm proving to you over a year that when you start seeing these blogs stacked on top of each other,
Mhm.
you start going, damn, this
Yeah.
this begins to make a lot of sense. And then you start to see our modern epidemics in not only in dentistry, but in medicine. There's a lot of tie-in. Like they're
Right.
cross-referenced, they're cross-linked, and
Mhm.
you begin to see why people are having problems. And then when you put the technology and the cell phones in front of these kids,
Mhm.
which is happening, you're actually making this worse. So you know why the orthodontist will poo-poo the screen issue, the poo-poo the technology issue? Because just like big tech, it makes them money.
Right.
The last thing that an orthodontist wants to see is daylight computer in the hand of a child.
Right.
Why? Because that kid is likely not going to have orthodontics done. The last thing that an orthodontist or an oral surgeon want to do is to see Doug Sandquist at a dental procedure or dental um, meeting get up and tell people, hey, when the sun rises, you need to get your kids up to save money down the road.
Mhm.
Let me tell you something. If you tell people the truth, people are going to respect you, Doug.
Right.
Um, your colleagues may hate you.
Right.
You're teaching people the truth. And guess what? When you are more trustworthy, you can build your practice around that. Why? Because you guys are all solo businessmen.
Right.
And ultimately, COVID is a blessing for you guys because when you start telling people the truth and you start doing it the right way, dude, you can totally change your profession. And it may
Right.
take 20 years to do it, but I got news for you. When I started doing this 20 years ago, everybody thought I was a crazy bastard too, and
Right.
embraced it. I said, God, call me crazy.
Right.
But eventually you're going to see something's going to happen and it's going to make you realize that I may have been right for longer than you. And
Right.
COVID was that issue for me.
Right.
COVID has been the opportunity that I've been waiting for, where people now see the sharp side of centralization and how dangerous it can be when you fall into the paradigm.
Right.
And when people realize that COVID is just one chapter in this whole big shit sandwich story,
Right.
that's when they begin to realize that functional medicine is a problem. Allopathic medicine, statins. I mean, dude, the list can go on
Yeah.
and on and on. But what's the grand unified theory that this all ties back to? Mitochondria,
Yeah.
mitochondrial
All of
DNA,
yeah.
oxygenation,
Mhm.
how much water are you making? How good is cytochrome 1? How is it linking to cardiolipin? How does this tie to, us turning over cell membranes so that the membranes can actually tell the seasons? We now just found recently what I would like to call is the electromagnetic tuning fork or the recycling center. It's called the hemiflusome. Most people, I knew that a hemiflusome had to exist. Why? Because back in the paleo times, I would say 10, 15 years ago, I told people that we know that mammals change their coat. I said there has to be a mechanism in us that allows that to happen where we change our fatty acids and we change the colors of our skin. Well, it turns out now we find out about this hemiflusome that it's tied to the endoplasmic reticulum, and that actually communicates that information to our exteriors. So those antennas then pay attention to the environment that we're in. And do I think that you're going to find in the next 10 years, I'll make a prediction for your audience,
Yeah.
that this hemiflusome mechanism and the mitoception, which is tied to both melanin and GDF15, you're going to find out that this is big in apnea patients. Watch. I'll bet you. Why? Because I know that the mechanism of people telling light and dark and temperature is defective at the exterior interior. So there's a disconnect from outside in. And that's ultimately what creates the aberrant light show inside that leads to a hypoplastic maxilla, that leads to, a mandible that's growing too much. And do I think that we're ultimately going to find when we get photomultipliers and we can put it in, say, the Gasserian ganglion, that we're going to get that information? Maybe I'll be dead, you'll still be alive, but do I think you might be alive at that time where someone like Alexis Cowan or maybe Cameron Borg innovate, that photo multiplier where we can actually stick it into the Gasserian ganglion and say, oh, look at this. Here's the aberrant light signal. Now we know exactly what we need to do. And then all of a sudden, optogenetically, we shine a certain amount of light in their eye and we can fix the problem in a couple of months.
Hmm.
It sounds Star Wars, but guess what?
I think it's
That's
possible.
actually how we work.
I think it's possible. So I had a question. I had another question from your was it Jehomes, the GOE podcast? Like that was revolutionary for me. But so the idea between iron at +2 and iron at +3, so met hemoglobin, right? So in researching that, normal humans have 1 to 2% met hemoglobin normally, right? And then up to 10% can be imperceptible. Like the human won't know that they have methemoglobinemia, right?
Most people don't know.
Yeah. So if we're doing a sleep study or we're doing a sleep screen or somebody's sticking a pulse ox on their finger, a regular pulse ox on their finger, and it says they're at 90, right? Or 89. And so you now determine they're hypoxic and you have not checked their met hemoglobin.
You committed malpractice.
So why don't sleep centers or sleep screens use co-oximeters? I know they're $1,000, but they're
Can I
not.
tell you why?
I know the answer, but go ahead.
Incentives dictate outcomes.
Yeah,
Did
because
they really want to solve
it
the
would
problem?
it would destroy the CPAP industry, right? I mean that's really
Because
it.
guess what? The CPAP industry has been based on all the stuff that you used to believe
Right.
that, oh, it's a lack of oxygen.
Right.
No, it's a broken mitochondria. When you give a broken mitochondria more oxygen, you're killing people.
Right.
Guess what? And what is that? That's another feeder band into the centralized
Right.
system of healthcare. So you just entered more people into the sausage grinder. Guess what? The system feeds back on itself. So it goes back to its incentives dictate outcomes. But when you're the smart guy and you're wiser and you begin to treat people differently, this is the way I would tell general dentists to start thinking about this, and sleep guys. You should start making friends with your sleep friends and you start a practice and say, look, we're going to do this differently. Because when you guys figure out that I'm right about this, you're going to be able to take your pocket, like you're in Arizona.
No.
Everybody's apnea is going
I'm
to
in the
come.
worst place.
But I'm saying, but everybody's going to come to you and say, doc, I really don't want to have surgery. I don't want to do this and that, but what do I need to do? And you start telling the truth and they start improving. It's great. Like yesterday, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but one of my members put a tweet out about his eyesight.
Mhm.
And he said, the most amazing thing is, it goes, I became a member of Jack 6 months ago, and all he told me to do was get in the sun, do all this. I went to my eye doctor yesterday, and he goes, my myopia is gone, and so is my astigmatism. And he was stunned. So one of the other doctors on Twitter, who's become a mitochondriac, even after being a food guru, he goes, isn't this awesome? And I waited to see if there was any optometrist or ophthalmologist, because they're not going to say that's awesome, because you're not going to need glasses. You're not going to need this and that. And that's the point. The point is that when people become aware that they are empowered to really, truly handle these own problems themselves, and they're very facile with the sciences. I'm going to tell you, I personally don't think what I said in the Nick Jaholmes podcast was that revolutionary, but I think the reason why people found it revolutionary, remember the question, Doug, that he asked me. He goes, Jack, I would like to discuss the evolution of mammals post KT event. I said, okay, well, let's talk about where we came from, the GOE. Makes really sense. Like when you're building a pyramid, you start at the base level, right?
Right.
So when you heard me lay out the case to him, you could see as a PhD and an evolutionary biologist, he was stunned because he was never forced to go back and do that.
Right.
And that's the point that I think when patients listen to this like, well, why can't I do this with my apnea?
Right.
Why can't I do this with my post and core? Why
Right.
can't I do this with my root canal? Why can't I do this with my restorative dentistry? And when you start asking your profession better questions, guess what? You find out who's thinking and who's not, who's open minded. Like you're clearly open minded. Why? Because I know a lot of things that you learned from me have kind of blown your own paradigm up, but that hasn't stopped you. It's
Right.
actually, okay, what can I do? Like you got to find your way. And once you find what the path is, what the collateral issues are, learning what in mitochondria is really important. I can tell you, CCO function is the single number one thing
Right.
that you be interested in,
Right.
but also so is the VDR
Right.
receptor. Is it 60 nanograms per deciliter or higher? Because that's the key number for apnea. And I would tell you, basically everybody who's got apnea is basically a Martian. They're completely a desert.
Right.
So you have to fix those two things. So if you said to me, Jack, would it be wise for me to recommend my patients to sleep grounded? The answer would be yes. Jack, is it wise for my apnea patients to consider deuterium depleted water, even though they don't have cancer? The answer is yes, if they can afford it. Now, why is that important? Because you're spending a little bit money now and taking it out of the $5,000 out of the orthodontist bank account that's going to come later. And if you sell it to the patient like that, they're going to be like, okay, that makes some fucking sense. I'm willing to go out to Amazon and buy the Hydro Health and put my kid on it. And then you say to them, well, here's another little trick you can do. You can take this salt that comes out of the ocean that doesn't have any bad fluoride in it. And there's a special place in France called Gironde that makes it. Put a dash of that in the deuterium depleted water when you're doing that. Put your kid in the sun and let's see what we can do if we put a plastic retainer and slowly open the jaw. Can we keep it there while we're adding redox power into his face? Hey, can we add, 2 ice bags on the side of the kid's neck while we're doing all this to cool the internal and external carotids down? Because you know that the maxilla is filled with the
Right.
external carotid. You learn that in dental school.
Right.
Well, guess what? Why do we want to do the internal and external? The internal helps the skull base, which starts where? Goes from the ethmoid plate all the way back. What sits in that area? That's where the Caesarean ganglion is. All of a sudden, you start going, wait a minute, this is anatomy. This is evolutionary biology. When we're putting people in cold and cooling those vessels down, we're adding electrons to the system and we're creating more oxygenation in a place that was hypoxic. You start going, wow, we're treating apnea at the functional level the way nature intended to do it, and we're not using any fancy bullshit to do it. We're actually working with nature. And the way I would tell you centralized apnea works now, it's like the right side of the boat is rowing one way and the left side's rowing the other, and you're just going in a circle. And what I just told you about how I think you should approach it is both sides rowing the same way so that you can grow that maxilla, so you can grow that mandible, so you can help the family understand that this is a postnatal event that's transgenerational that parents do have control over if they're taught what they need to do. And you're the teacher, dude. You're the
Yep.
guy that actually figured this out because of the failures that you saw on the centralized side. If you don't think that's going to make you a better doctor and a better diagnostician, people will spend extra money to come talk to Doug.
Right.
And I really, truly hope
Yep.
that you show this video to dentists
Right.
because they think that they make all their money on procedures.
Right.
That is a centralized bullshit lie.
Right. I mean, I'm still very much centralized. I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm not, but my goal is to at least understand like where we're at. And if I can move to help people do stuff without, that's exactly where I would like to be. The challenge is adults. I mean, adults that have had, you know,
Adults
that,
are locked in, I'm going to tell you, is a
yeah,
different story. That's
yeah,
where I think surgery still plays a role. Why? Because they never got told the truth.
yeah. But
So
I think
you
I
have to
think
move them around.
you have to move them around, but I think you have to move them around in the right order, and that's where I think you have to train the tongue, you have to get the CCO going, do all those things before you even think of
That's where,
moving
but that's
bones.
where adults are the same as kids because
Yep.
you're right. You have to get the mitochondrial dynamics down first,
Right.
get them locked in before you start moving the
Yep.
foundation around.
Yep.
I totally agree with you,
Yep.
but it's kind of the same thing that I've said on the scoliosis side to
Yep.
a lot of my friends. I said, look, I'm not trying to take scoliosis surgery away from you. What I'm trying to tell you is that the method in which you do it needs to change.
Yeah.
That's it.
I agree. So, well, Jack, I know you it's another appointment today, so I love this today. I mean, I think this is I hope to share it with colleagues, and I hope I ruffle some feathers. I mean, I think I'm in a better position this now to actually kind of I own it now. I feel like I
Well,
believe it
you
now.
also have a lot. You have a lot of blogs that I've written in the
Yep.
last year for you that are really tied to this
Right.
story.
Yep.
You know, like you could tell them, go listen to Nick Jahomes
Right.
and listen to what Jack said to Huberman, and then here, read this. Like the stuff that right now hasn't been publicly made, but I know you've read
Right.
the evolution of like heme proteins and the
Right.
evolution of melanin. When
Yep.
you see that and you put it in this GOE framework, you start
Right.
to go, oh, this is really hard to argue with
Yeah.
because this is foundational stuff.
It is. Of course, my centralized colleagues are going to say, well, you know, where's the studies? Where are the randomized control studies? And I'm like, well, I mean, where has that led us to?
Oh, no, I would flip that around. I'd say, wait a minute. You're actually going to tell me that a randomized controlled clinical study that has no light controls somehow makes
Mhm.
that tells you that's a doctor that you don't want to send anybody to. In
Right.
fact, evolution doesn't need a randomized controlled clinical trial.
Right.
It's how life went from two domains to the eukaryotic domain. And last time I checked, everybody that sits in a dental chair is a eukaryote.
Right.
So guess what?
Yeah.
That is the big issue. And that argument can really be knocked out of the park because it actually shows you the mindset of the doctor. They're not ready to decentralize anything. Why?
Yeah.
They don't even understand that the laws in nature are not subject to randomized controlled clinical trials. And Doug, I'm going to say something else.
Yep.
I think it's a perfect place to say it. Let me tell you just how deep the fallacy for RCTs go. If you understand RCTs, you power it up and you believe in cause and effect. Okay. Cause and effect actually works in a world where time is absolute. That's a Newtonian world. In 1905, Einstein told us that time is relative. Do you know what time relativity, one of the collateral effects is? That there can be no cause and effect. Cause and effect is an illusion. But just remember what you just said. The doctor's telling you, where's the studies? If there's no cause and effect, how good are the studies?
Right.
There's your problem. Everything's based on probability.
Right.
So I can tell you it's more probable than not. If a kid and their parents don't spend time in the sun
Right.
because of the photoelectric effect, they're going to have apnea. And I don't need an RCT to prove it to me
Right.
because the laws of nature are invariant.
Right.
There's the key. And that's kind of what you got to get to them. And I know that's even a bigger punch in the mouth because I know dentists don't really understand that in a Newtonian world, time is absolute.
Right.
That was also proven as pseudoscience.
Right.
Now we're in a world where everything is more probable than not because it's probabilistically based.
Right.
That means studying anything in dentistry and medicine using RCT is fundamentally pseudoscientific.
Right.
That's part of the reason why when you listen to the Uberman podcast, what did I say? I said about Eddie Chang. Eddie Chang, a neurosurgeon from UCSF,
Right.
told Uberman that 50% of what's published is bullshit. What did I say to Rick and Uberman?
99.
9.9% because of what I just told you.
Right.
Now you know why.
Now I know why.
That's probably a good way to end this podcast because
I think
I
so.
imagine if I pissed off more dentists, that will really shock them.
I think so. So thanks, Jack. I hope to do this again sometime. Maybe less sooner than a year if I can figure out which as I keep learning, it's good to kind of catch up again. So I appreciate this. So thank you.
No problem. Anytime.
Okay.
Bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.